The cover-up, subsequent events, revelations, and the non-investigation of 9/11.
We are now at a pivotal point. Our situation is comparable to that of Nazi Germany in 1939, when the German people allowed Adolf Hitler to persuade them that it was in their best interest to begin attacking other nations. This is the simple truth beneath all the propaganda, justifications, rationalizations, and excuses. As always, we must choose whether we are going to be governed by fear or by love. And the moral of the story is that those who fail to learn the lessons which history teaches are doomed to repeat them.
Allison Hartsong, Mount Shasta, California, in a letter to the Sacramento Bee on October 12, 2002. In the days, weeks, and months since 9/11, our nation has changed. We have been saturated by 24/7 fear-based, biased, inaccurate, racist, and hateful broadcasting. Literally, there are a couple of announcers on MSNBC who appear to be close to frothing at the mouth as they spew their contorted messages. In this period of time, there have not been one or two manipulated Hegelian events. There have been dozens. Following are just a few of the happenings and incidents that deserve attention. Point 42. In the weeks after 9/11, anonymous letters and packages were sent to several unsuspecting people filled with the deadly anthrax powder. Senator Tom Daschle's office was the most publicized location to receive this deadly surprise. 6 people from around the country were killed by this insane scheme. Of course, the corporate media at first blamed Al-Qaeda, and then the experts from the Council on Foreign Relations scratched their chins and shifted the focus to Saddam Hussein. The word was now out.
We have to stop Iraq.
Later on, when scientific analysis was made showing that this particular strain was a technologically superior anthrax that was 10 times finer in micron size than the finest known grade of Soviet anthrax with an additive that was only made at an American weapons laboratory, the talking heads suddenly dropped the issue like a hot potato. The sales of Cipro, an expensive designer antibiotic, went through the roof, making the parent company hundreds of millions of dollars. Later, it was learned that President Bush and his inner circle had all been put on Cipro a month before 9/11. As a sad postscript, 18 prominent biologists and virologists from around the world who may have had knowledge about the origins of this type of anthrax have all mysteriously died between September the 15th, 2001 and November the 20th, 2002. Point 43. On November 12, 2001, American airliner Flight 587, a 300 Airbus, took off from Kennedy International Airport on its way to the Dominican Republic. Minutes after takeoff, the plane lost its rear wings, dropped its engines, and crashed into Rockaway, New York. The official explanation given was the plane hit the backwash of the plane ahead of it, which created so much turbulence the plane broke apart. The results from this accident were 260 innocent people killed, and the American public was further traumatized. The problem with this story is that even according to the FAA, Flight 587 was more than 3 minutes behind the preceding flight. This distance and time buffer is well within the safety guidelines of the FAA. Now think about it. Every day for the last 40 years, thousands of airliners have flown at these or closer distances to each other, and never before has such an accident happened. Planes don't just break apart in the middle of the air. It is also interesting that no full investigation of this horrible accident was made. What is going on here? Point 44. There was no move to initiate an official congressional investigation of the most significant terrorist attack in the history of our nation until November of 2002, 14 months after the attack. Then, Bush had the audacity to name Henry Kissinger, who will be seen as one of the most tarnished and corrupt characters in the history of our nation, as heading this investigation. Weeks later, Kissinger resigned because he would not disclose his client list. The Illuminati are so overconfident that they are intentionally rubbing the noses of American citizens with this arrogant insult called an investigation. This is a total outrage. Sadly, a vast majority of both Democratic and Republican congressmen and senators have not even called for an honest inquiry, did not care, or were bullied into going along, and have openly supported this cover-up. Perhaps this is one of the most pertinent indications of how far and how fast the integrity of our representative government system has fallen. Fortunately, there were a few exceptions to this rule. Congressman Ron Paul of Texas spoke articulately and courageously for the truth. Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney from Georgia also asked for an investigation, and for her efforts was instantly branded by the media and some within her own party as almost a traitor. Her opponents collected more than $1 million, much of it came from out of state, to defeat her in her bid for re-election. Another voice of reason was Senator Paul Wellstone, who went against the politically correct posturing and asked that there be an official examination of 911. On October the 25th, 2002, weeks before his tightly contested election, Senator Wellstone's private Beach King aircraft went down in northern Minnesota, killing the senator, his family, campaign workers, and the pilots. No cause of accident has been released. In the following weeks, the Republican candidate who fully supported the Patriot Act, the Homeland Security Bill, and the invasion of Iraq was elected and shifted the balance of power in the Senate to the Republicans. To these voices of reason and a handful of other elected representatives who had the guts to speak the truth, we need to say a prayer of thanks. Point 45. The first procedure at the scene of a crime is to protect and investigate the evidence. However, remember what happened at Oklahoma City. According to General Ben Parton and other investigators of the Alfred Murrah building, the evidence had been blown up, hauled away, and buried before detectives could make an investigation. The company that did all of this was the Controlled Demolition Company. It just so happens the Controlled Demolition Company was hired within a short period of time to clear away and sell the rubble of the World Trade Center at a very profitable rate. The Controlled Demolition Company did their job well and also kept everyone away from examining or even photographing the evidence. The oldest, largest, and most prestigious fireman's magazine in the country is the Firefighters Magazine. Its editor, Bill Manning, was very critical about the lack of investigation and the removal of evidence. He said it was a
half-baked farce.
Point 46. The FBI, CIA, NSA, and administration all deny they had prior knowledge that such an attack would occur. Yet, the evidence that has surfaced since 9/11 shows: A. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak said in a December 2001 interview,
"We expected something was going to happen and informed the Americans. We told them."
B. Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco, author Salman Rushdie, and Attorney General John Ashcroft have all made public statements that they were warned not to fly on commercial planes at this time. C. German police and Israeli intelligence both warned of the coming attacks against the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. D. FBI agent Robert Wright held a press conference in May of 2002. He said he had been threatened with national security violations if he shared with the public the FBI's previous information. E. The managers of the flight school in Minnesota, where suspected hijacker Zacharias Musari was taking flight lessons, called the FBI several times to warn them. Regional FBI agents wanted to do a full investigation, but were stopped by Central Headquarters. F. A $7 billion legal suit has been brought against Bush and other governmental administrators by 400 families who lost relatives on 9/11. The suit is claiming that Bush and others allowed this terrorist act to occur. Their attorney, Stanley Hilton, is pointing out that Mohammed Atta and 2 other hijackers were given training at the Pensacola Naval Flight Station. G. It is reported that employees of Odigo, an instant messaging company, did not show up for work on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. Odigo's headquarters, which are in Tel Aviv, Israel, just happened to be next to the Department of Counterterrorism, and on and on. Point 47. At first, we were told that there would be up to 50,000 casualties, and thank God that number ended up being much lower. Here is some factual information we should consider. A. MSNBC reported that many of the schools and businesses around the World Trade Center were half empty that day. The World Trade Center North Tower was hit in an area where there were the fewest number of occupied offices. B. Flights 11, 176, 93, and 77 had combined seating for more than 1,328 passengers, while on that day there were 266 passengers, which is a 20.03% occupancy. Normal occupancy for transcontinental flights averages over 75%. American and United Airlines have been very tight-lipped about giving out information. C. Flight 77, or the drone, zeroed in on an area of the Pentagon that was being renovated, which was known to have the fewest number of people. This was also the exact opposite side from Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld's office. The American public has been told that these hijackers were emotionally unstable members of the Islamic Jihad and were out to attack the Great Satan. If this is true, would they not try to do the maximum damage? Or is this information just unusual coincidence? Point 48. It has been learned that on August the 15th, 2001, many of the leaders of the Taliban were in Houston negotiating with the Unocal Corporation for rights to build a gas pipeline from the oil and gas fields east of the Caspian Sea through Afghanistan and out to the Arabian Ocean. Unocal is closely connected with the Halliburton Corporation, which was formerly managed by Vice President Dick Cheney. These oil and gas fields are considered to have some of the largest reserves in the world. It is interesting to note that after the Taliban turned down Unocal, A. President Bush signed a presidential directive prior to 9/11 to organize the attack of Afghanistan. B. The new president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, is a former employee of Unocal. C. The first piece of new business for the leaders of the Northern Alliance was an agreement for Unocal and Halliburton to build the pipeline. Point 49. Our Air Force sent out thousands of planes to shoot high-tech missiles into Afghanistan's few existing office buildings, warehouses, stores, schools, hospitals, and homes. We sent thousands of troops over and invaded their country, destroyed their ragtag military forces, and overthrew their government. This is what I call an act of war. Maybe you would too. There was a vote by Congress to allow the president to proceed, yet Congress never declared war, as is prescribed very articulately in our Constitution. Either we follow the rules of the Constitution, or we don't have one. Point 50. Oh, by the way, not one of the hijackers was from Afghanistan. Bin Laden said that he didn't do it. And the Taliban said that they would hand bin Laden over if the U.S. would give them any proof that he was involved. Just for the record. Point 51. American Special Forces directed and supported the Northern Alliance in defeating the Taliban forces. It was really not much of a battle. It was the Americans with 21st century Star Wars weapons versus a bunch of goat herders with 19th and 20th century rifles. One of the American military's favorite tactics in this duck shoot was to drop incendiary bombs from planes that would fly in at altitudes far higher than the range of the pathetic pop-gun artillery pieces the Taliban possessed. These bombs would spray a petroleum substance over an area about the size of a football field. As this substance was floating down to the ground, it would be ignited, creating both an unusually severe thermal combustion and also it would suck all of the air out of the area. No living being could escape this holocaust. After one of these confrontations in northern Afghanistan, approximately 2,000 dazed Taliban were taken prisoner. The Northern Alliance victors crammed the prisoners into railroad boxcars, which were left to bake in the hot sun, and gave them no food or water. After several days, those who were still alive, many of them mere boys, were taken out of the cars, shot in the head, and buried in shallow graves. Can't you feel the love? Point 52. Speak about feeling the love. On 9/11, 2,998 people were killed in New York, Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon. It was called
the worst terrorist act in history.
The pain and suffering to the related families and to the people around the world in general cannot be described. Many people say and believe that our nation is a cut above the rest because many profess to believe in the teachings of Jesus. Yet according to Professor Mark Harold of the University of New Hampshire, between October the 7th and December the 7th of 2001, our special forces killed a minimum of 3,800 innocent Afghan tribal people, mostly old men, women, and children. Professor Harold says that number is only what was reported by the major media. The real numbers of slaughtered non-combatants was probably closer to 5,000. And papers in India reported that there were more than 20,000 killed. All of this was done in the name of the people of the United States, under the euphemism,
Operation Infinite Justice.
There has been very little response or even discussion by the clergy, media, or population in general about this massacre.
I wonder, what would Jesus say about Operation Infinite Justice?
Point 53. The following could be considered funny if it were not so distressing. On the morning of 9/11, President Bush was at the Emma E. Booker Elementary School in Sarasota, Florida. Before going into the classroom for a photo op, he was told by White House Chief of Staff Andrew Card that Flight 11 had just crashed into the North Tower. Undeterred and with a stiff upper lip, Bush proceeded with his schedule and went into the classroom for photos with the kids who were going to read him a story about a pet goat. During the pet goat story, Andrew Card came in and told the president that a second airliner had just slammed into the World Trade Center South Tower.
Bush then responded with the clear thinking and determination of a true leader. He stayed in the classroom listening to the pet goat story for another 26 minutes.
After leaving the classroom, it took him another 29 minutes before he put the military on high alert. And it was during this period of time that the Pentagon was hit. From there, instead of returning to Washington as Commander-in-Chief, to huddle with his military advisors and to reassure the American people, he flew over to Louisiana and then up to the Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. He did not arrive back in Washington until 7 p.m., 10 hours after he had been told about the second flight that crashed into the World Trade Center.
That pet goat story must have been mesmerizing.
Point 54. When I originally got into politics, one of the first axioms I learned when trying to figure out what was going on was,
Follow the money.
it must be pointed out that the Bush family is deeply involved with the Carlyle Group, one of the nation's largest defense contractors. The Carlyle Group is a multinational octopus that is generating megabucks from the war on terrorism. Another one of the knights in shining armor that is profiting big time from the Carlyle Group and this hysteria is Khalid bin Mahfouz, brother-in-law of Osama bin Laden. Brother Cheney, as already mentioned, has his fingers deep in the pie. When you look at the list of personalities that are supposedly serving our nation in positions of leadership that appear to be making a killing out of the killing, it really is quite sad. Point 55. The World Trade Center land lease was sold to a Mr. Silverstein for $100 million down, just a short time previous to the attack. He put a very large insurance premium on the complex, even though the buildings were experiencing higher than normal vacancies and had significant asbestos problems. This son of a gun is now trying to get double the amount on his original insurance coverage, $7.1 billion. Not a bad return. And again, speaking about following the money, it was said several times in the first weeks after 9/11 that there were large, and I mean large, international deposits of gold bullion that were deposited in the huge vault in the basement. Gold is a very heavy element, and though it could melt, it would not be pulverized. It has also been said that there were large digital deposits credited to the bank within the World Trade Center. Where, oh where did this money go? Nobody but nobody seems to be talking. Can you say,
Bank robbery?
Point 56. George Orwell, in his classic book 1984, created a story that seems so far out just years ago. Today, Orwell's description of a society gone mad with doublespeak and tyranny does not seem so foreign. The Patriot Act is thousands of pages. I wonder if this could have been prepared before 9/11? And strips our Constitution down to its shell. It allows the police to enter your home, take your possessions, and to arrest you without a warrant. Further, it allows trials without juries. The administration says that this is only for terrorists. However, the definition of what a terrorist is undefined and at the discretion of the administration. The Office of Homeland Security is right out of Adolf Hitler's manual, and its enthusiastic leader, Mr. Tom Ridge, seems intent on exercising his almost unlimited power. Whole books can be and are being written on this unconstitutional, blatant, and immoral grab for power. These two quotes by our president are very indicative of what is happening.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.
George Bush, December the 18th, 2001, on CNN.
This new law that I signed today will allow surveillance of all communications used by terrorists, including email, the internet, and all cell phones.
President George W. Bush. Point 57. Since 9/11, appropriations for military spending is up more than $60 billion, and appropriations for the alphabet agencies is up a minimum of $6 billion, probably much more. During this same period of time, the deficit on our trade balance has increased by more than $40 billion, and the so-called surplus they said we had on our annual operating budget has again turned into a major, big-time deficit. Somebody, well, that means you and me, is going to have to pay for this with more taxes or more inflation. This is a simple fact that the CFR boys don't talk much about. Maybe it's because they own the banks that are making the profits from these loans. Point 58. Osama bin Laden. Remember that turban fellow? For 6 months, you could see his face full time on almost every channel, and then we invaded Afghanistan, and Mr. bin Laden suddenly disappeared. In November of 2001 through January of 2002, MSNBC, The New Yorker, and The Times all ran articles that said Pakistan's secret police, the ISI, which are directly controlled by the CIA, airlifted several thousand members of Al-Qaeda and perhaps Osama out of Afghanistan to safety. If this is true, it is one more major act of treason. It is worthy to look at the similarities of 9/11 and what happened during the Gulf War in 1991. For almost a year in 1991, we heard nothing except how despotic Saddam Hussein was. Our nation then spent close to $100 billion, invaded Iraq, smashed his army, destroyed the infrastructure of that nation, and killed over 100,000 Iraqis. Bush Sr. then told our military to leave Saddam alone. What is this? What the power elite did not tell you is that Saddam Hussein, like Osama bin Laden, was a CIA asset, and that they needed him as a Trojan horse. Mark my words, if Osama is still alive, he will be back in the news in the not-too-distant future, when they need him. Point 59. Speaking of Iraq, Bush, Cheney, and the rest of the military-industrial establishment have been using every tactic they can to gain support for an attack on Iraq. Their story is that Saddam has built up a huge arsenal of weapons of mass destruction, together with creating a secret long-range missile program. The problem with this story is that in 1991 we blew away their military, destroyed their infrastructure, and since that period of time we have had an embargo and inspectors in their country. An appalling sidebar to this story is, according to the United Nations, over 500,000 Iraqi children have died of starvation and lack of medical supplies since the embargo has been in effect. To be conservative, let's say that the true numbers were wildly inflated by 500%. That still means that over 100,000 children have died. Yes, Saddam is a tyrant, just like all the leaders of nations in the Middle East are. And I'm not wild about Iraq, but I do know they love their children and families just as we do. Saddam has said over and over that their country is open to inspection, and according to the top UN inspector, Scott Ritter, an American Marine, and a Bush Republican to boot, Iraq has none of these weapons. I repeat, he says Iraq has none of these weapons. Point 60. Oh, a lot of this information is really sad and depressing, so on this last point, we'll give you something that should make you smile, a wry smile. A, the FBI has said that they had no prior information, but within days of the attack, they had the names and pictures of 19 hijackers. Sherlock Holmes on steroids couldn't have come close to this feat. Oh, by the way, again, several of the names on that list have shown up alive in Morocco, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. B. The FBI said they found Mohammed Atta's bag, which supposedly did not make it on the plane. What incredibly good fortune for the perpetrators. Investigators. In this travel bag was all sorts of information. The only question is, why would a hijacker who was intent on committing suicide pack a travel bag and load it full of incriminating evidence? C. Last but not least, days after 911, the New York police chief says they found the passport of one of the hijackers. Amazing! They would have us believe that a paper passport jumped out of his coat, morphed through the plane, passed through the fireball, and wafted gently down to the city streets to be discovered unharmed. Who writes this stuff? Looking at the big picture.
The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists.
J. Edgar Hoover. In bullet summary, we know 1. The CIA helped create Al-Qaeda and that bin Laden was a CIA asset. 2. The Bush and bin Laden families have been longtime friends and business partners. We also know sources high in the government have interfered with the investigation of Osama. 3. Even though there is overwhelming objective information that demonstrates that there were numerous people, agencies, and governments that had awareness of the diabolical plot previous to 911, our FBI and CIA stoutly maintain they had no prior knowledge. 4. The information as presented to the American public about the hijackers and what happened with Flights 11, 175, 93, and 77 is full of gaping holes and misinformation. 5. The jetliners did not bring down World Trade Center buildings 1 and 2. Further, the media and government have promoted the pancake theory as the cause of the collapse. Objective review of the evidence shows that this theory does not hold water. 6. It is apparent explosives were in place prior to the planes hitting the buildings, and that these explosives were used in the demolition of World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7. Further, there was also a bomb or bombs in World Trade Center building 6. 7. Flight 93 was shot down over Pennsylvania. 8. There was either massive criminal negligence on the parts of the FAA and NORAD, or, at some level of command, the orders were given to step down and not scramble fighters to protect New York City or the Capitol. 9. The government is withholding vital information concerning Flight 77 and what actually happened at the Pentagon. 10. The administration has quashed all efforts to have an honest congressional investigation of the worst terrorist act in our nation's history. 11. Between paper passports passing unharmed through fireballs, hijackers leaving a Koran in a strip bar, and a suicide bomber packing a travel bag that contains complete details of the crime, which conveniently does not make the flight, there appears to be a significant amount of manufactured evidence. 12. These events deserve further investigation. American Airlines Flight 587 mysteriously went down over New York City with no investigation. Super high-tech anthrax was used as a terrorist weapon. A disco in Bali was blown up using high-tech explosives. A sniper killed several people indiscriminately in Washington. And Senator Paul Wellstone, who had been asking the wrong questions, dies in a fiery airplane accident. 13. Bush, Cheney, and many others who daily have been advocating intense military action in the Middle East are directly invested in companies that make huge profits from warfare. 14. The results of the Afghanistan War. Constitutional law was abandoned. Thousands of innocent tribal peoples were killed. A puppet government was installed and is headed by a UNICAL employee. The pipeline for UNICAL and Halliburton was okayed. The World Bank and the IMF now control the Afghanistan economy. And opium production has increased by over 900%. The result is the Illuminati have gained control of another country, and the quality of life for the peoples of Afghanistan has been ratcheted to a new low. 15. With the creation of Homeland Security and the Patriot Act, what doublespeak, our Constitution has been raped, and we are now de facto in a police state. 16. The corporate media, television, radio, magazines, and newspapers parrot the party line like clones. In a truly free country, the press has to ask the hard questions and do real investigating. This is not happening. Even more distressing, a vast majority of Americans have accepted this story, hook, line, and sinker. Why would they do this? So, we have all of this information, but the obvious question is why? Why would they do this? When Rome was still a functioning republic, Roman judges would always ask the question,
Qui bono?
or who benefited from this crime? When we ask ourselves this simple question, we see A. The arms dealers are selling hundreds of billions of dollars in new weaponry. B. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the World Bank have created over $1 trillion in new loans in the last year alone. C. Ariel Sharon and his group of hardliner political Zionists are jumping for joy because they have been pushing the United States for years to aggressively attack Arab nations. This is a very sensitive issue because there are distinct, opposing, and emotional points of view concerning the Middle East, regardless of which side of the fence you stand on concerning Israel and the Arabs. When Ariel Sharon recently said,
I don't care what the American people think. I own the Congress.
it should create significant concern for all Americans, especially because he is probably correct. D. The multinational oil corporations have taken control of the rich Caspian oil fields and now have their eyes set on Iraq. E. The Illuminati has always known that the freedom-loving, God-conscious people of the United States were always going to be their biggest problem. With 911, many of our brothers and sisters have become so afraid and so confused that they are willing to turn over their rights for promised security. I realize the immensity of this information, this conspiracy, is hard to accept. Our minds tell us that we are in America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, and this is not the way it is supposed to be. Well, as Dorothy said in The Wizard of Oz,
Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore.
take a deep breath and please listen to these following quotes.
Today, America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all people of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, Individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being, granted to them by the world government.
Henry Kissinger, Bilderberg Conference, 1991, in Evian, France.
We can't be so fixated on our desire to preserve the rights of ordinary Americans.
President Bill Clinton in USA Today on March the 11th, 1993, page 2A. The interest behind the Bush administration, such as the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, founded by Brzezinski for David Rockefeller, and the Bilderberg Group, have prepared for and are now moving to implement open world dictatorship within the next 5 years. Dr. Johannes Koppel, former official of the German Ministry for Defense and advisor to NATO.
We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order.
David Rockefeller. Is resistance futile? Well, isn't this lovely? All of the major movers and shakers and warlords are telling us to our faces to pack it in because the game is essentially over. It reminds me of the television series Star Trek, when the Enterprise, the good guys, come up against the Borg, the bad guys, who are half human and half machine. The Borg repeat only one message.
Resistance is futile.
We really do have some significant choices in front of us. If one is relatively new to this point of view, it can be, and probably is, very overwhelming. Most people in our nation have been so well conditioned, and their minds are so compartmentalized that they cannot even contemplate this information. However, since you are listening to this booklet now, you would not have gotten to this point without having at least a relatively open mind. The first question must be,
is this information true?
My response? Each person who reads this booklet and other information concerning 911 needs a very discerning mind. Please, please, please check and double-check all the references. This stuff is kind of serious, to put it gently. Perhaps most importantly, listen to your subconscious. Does your inner voice say that this information is correct? This is a very individual choice. The second question is the big one.
What can we do? Or is resistance futile?
Here is where we really separate the wheat from the chaff. Clearly, these rascals control the banks, the media, the government, most of the technology, and the minds of most people. It doesn't sound fair, does it? This is where faith and prayer have to become the guiding light. Do we really believe in the Creator? Do we really believe that the Creator wants our families, our culture, and our world dominated by literally a handful of materialistic, egotistical, secular atheists who view 99% of the human race as cattle, or at best, no more than servants? I know that these are hard concepts to let one's mind contemplate, but we really don't have the luxury of time. Be aware, ignorance and denial are death sentences. We really are in a cycle that is comparable to Nazi Germany. Though there are places you can run to, and perhaps immigrate to, they really won't be safe for very long. If you know in your heart that there is a creative force, God, you know that this march towards a tyrannical new world order is not something that God wants. This nightmare is the creation of human beings who have forgotten their connection with Spirit and have and are making some very bad choices. It is up to us as individuals to examine ourselves and decide whether we are going to focus our life energies on love, truth, and justice and stand for these ideals, or whether we are going to give away our own spiritual sovereignty to the masters of deception. The 7-point program. If we truly believe in God, and if we truly want to experience our highest spiritual awareness, then we have some significant work in front of us. Because such an amazing percentage of good people are putting their heads in the sand when it comes to 911, it means that we have that much more work to do. But remember, at the start of the American Revolution, only 5% of the colonists were really leading the way. The restoration of our republic and revitalization of any semblance of truth, peace, and justice for our civilization is spiritual work. And as Thomas Jefferson said,
resistance to tyrants is obedience to God.
The following is a 7-step program for every citizen. First and foremost, close your eyes and go deep within your soul and humbly and passionately connect with your divine self, the creative force of the universe. Ask for clarity, guidance, and strength. Remember, the power of prayer is much more powerful than the power of hate. If ever there was a time to put aside our egos and ask for help, now is that time. Awareness of the game is the second step. The Illuminati, in their own twisted and sad minds, have created this extraordinary illusion to create as much fear as possible, and they have done an extraordinarily good job. We also need to understand that 911 is not the apex of this perverted drama. It is only the opening salvo of the power elite's in-game strategy. Most certainly there will be further Hegelian events, problem, reaction, and solution, that will be manufactured and coming our way. The third step in this dance is gather as much objective information as possible. As Francis Bacon said,
knowledge is power.
The source and reference material in this audio is just awesome. Fourth, we positively, absolutely, no questions asked, have to share this information with friends, family, acquaintances, strangers, everyone. Don't be shy. Sharing this information with others is a great way to start because it is short and hopefully understandable and of interest. Many of the people that you share this information with won't get it, but believe me, every day there are more and more people who are waking up to the lies and manipulation. Creating a website, starting a study group, or even getting a public access television show is something each person is capable of doing. Yes, these actions do take time and energy, but you know what? The rewards of reaching out and sharing this essential information with others is extremely rewarding on a personal level. Step 5. Stop playing their game. Self-sufficiency is the key word. Put a ceiling on desires and do not live on credit. Know that the number one weapon that the elite use to enslave us emotionally, mentally, and physically is through the manipulation of the fractional reserve banking systems. Further, know that bullies, tyrants, and dictators always want to be the center of attention. And in today's world, our society is caught up in glorifying the power elite. Our media is totally fixated on the politicians, movie stars, famous athletes, and the mega rich. Turn off the TV. It really is a mind sucker. And stop supporting the Church of Hollywood. Know it is time for the sovereign peoples of this nation to start creating our own communication systems, schools, businesses, and economies that are based on sustainability, value, and higher human values. We need to focus our attentions on the real and good things of life and the obvious, like buying American-made products. Number 6 is the hard one. Love all and serve all. This is the external spiritual step. Letting go of fear and manifesting love for ourselves, friends, family, and even those rascals who are part of the power elite. This is something I'm still working on. And helping those who are less fortunate than ourselves. This also includes staying in the moment, giving our very finest attention and energies to this situation, and detaching from the results. By staying centered and having faith in the Creator, we will be able to speak the truth and do our work with courage, power, and wisdom. Oh, the 7th point. To some, it may seem less important, but to me, it is a big one. Get outside, breathe deeply, hang out with your friends, play with your family, have fun, and remember to laugh. For a life without joy is just not living. Okay, so that's the story. It comes down to a personal choice for each person. We can live in fear and ignorance and watch as victims as our nation, community, and families are threatened by the rising tide of tyranny. Or we can stay in the moment, open and follow our hearts to God's love, claim our divine sovereignty, and do the right thing. Remember, it's up to us.
Hi, this is George Humphrey. At the present time, the United States military is in Iraq, and to date, close to 1,000 American boys and girls have been killed. Over 9,000 have been sent home wounded, and we've spent over $250 billion. Using conservative numbers, over 15,000 Iraqis have been killed. We have turned their society into shambles, and central Iraq has been turned into an ecological wasteland because of the use of depleted uranium. And, by the way, there were no weapons of mass destruction. Quite clearly, we all have a choice. Is the truth important? Do we want to live in a constitutional republic where individual rights are honored, or do we want to continue to hand over our nation to the self-professed power elite and continue this march toward a complete police state? Most importantly, do we believe in the Creator and the universal laws of truth, peace, justice, and love? I hope that you found this documentary of interest and value, and I hope that you will check out the reference. Thanks for your interest.